he said, take it from me, somebody who owns a giant company. You'll never be able to fill that giant God-sized hole in your heart with money or anything else like that. I tried. I have a giant business, and it didn't change it one bit.
I was telling you earlier that I've been following you for a couple months, and I've really resonated with your content. You and your awesome wife are just always dropping truth bombs and showing what a really good life with God can be. And so I wanted to have you on today to kind of tell me your story, your background, and then how you got to be where you are. I think it's going to be a fascinating story.
Yeah, absolutely, brother. No, thank you for honoring myself and my wife. Yeah, I'm definitely down to go through my struggles, right? Because the person that we're most likely or qualified to lead is the person that we used to be, right? So however I can share my testimony to lead others is my pleasure.
Right on. Thank you.
I have multi-layers to my testimony, but I've been a believer pretty much my whole life. In one shape or another. I was raised Catholic, baptized Catholic. I don't go to a Catholic church anymore. Not that the church did anything wrong to me in any way, shape, or form. It's just I go to a non-denominational style now. But my mom was always like a hardcore Catholic, and so I would go, a couple times a year with her. But when I got to high school, I went to a Catholic high school, but I was like believing, but that's where it stopped. And I came from a home where my parents, my dad was a sheriff's deputy, and even though he was a man of the law, he was not, God bless him, I'm not trying to dog him, in any way, shape, or form, just part of the testimony. But he was a person who didn't lead himself well. Things I saw him do to my mom, not good. And he was that guy who would say, don't do as I do as I say. And that did not resonate with me, especially as you can probably see by my what I do for a living is I'm an entrepreneur. I'm kind of the black sheep and whatnot. And so that didn't go well with me as a teenager. And so I definitely rebelled because I was by far the shyest person in my high school. Like literally didn't kiss a girl until I was out of high school. Barely talked to anybody, which is crazy if you fast forward to now, right? Like, what we do for a living is like, man, that's all I do all day is talk to strangers and people all over the world. And so it's just such a crazy way what God can do in our lives when we give him something to work with. But because I was that shy person and because I kind of came from a home that wasn't really serving me or leading me well, I was left wanting for more. And so once I kind of got out of high school, I really started drinking, and all through high school, I was smoking weed and things like that. But, and when I got out of high school is when I started drinking, and then the drinking led to other things. And I made a lot of bad decisions in my life at that point in time, but it was kind of a cool twist to that is I met Diane when she was 17, I was 18, and we started dating. But that was around the time when, man, I was finally getting attention from other people. I was finding my voice. And so unfortunately, I was the worst boyfriend at that time. I was cheating on her. I was doing drugs. I was doing all this stuff. And she's always been the same amazing person, but just leveled up herself on those own ways. And so, man, just to kind of run through that real quick, I became a drug addict. I was cheating on her. And once I had a multi-years of being hardcore down like pain pill addiction, I couldn't get out. Nothing was serving me, right? Like, and I tried to quit multiple times, as I'm sure you've talked to plenty of addicts, right? Like you quit for 30 days, you quit for 2 weeks, you quit for this. And after all that time, like nothing would serve me until I finally was broken and I needed something to fix it. And the only thing that was God. Like, it was crazy. And as cliche as that sounds for a lot of people, like, it's real. And I have a crazy testimony story where, like, I don't want to go into the whole story because I'll take up the whole time, but literally where one day at that time I was going to the Catholic church where I went to confession, and I was in like a serious hardcore battle that day with addiction. And I walked out of confession that day and have never been tempted by drugs ever since that day. And that's pretty typically, you don't see that in addiction world. It's something you usually have to battle for a long time, even though you're not doing it. Whereas I didn't have to. So it was kind of a crazy story at that moment. But fast forward, man, I was always working in this normal job at a casino for 11 years, just doing like the mundane thing, making an okay living. But I always knew there was a calling higher for my life, dude. And man, it came to a point where I had to quit my job, and I quit my job. And that was about 11 years ago. And I was on fire for God at that time, like literally on fire for God. And then I went into like a wilderness season for gosh, probably 7, 8 years after that, which ended probably about a little over 3 years ago.
Can we back up? Can we back up? Are you cool talking about your low point where you like had a transformation where you gave up drugs? Like how God intervened in that moment? Are you cool talking about that?
Yeah, I mean, so that moment, it's so weird. Like recently, I got invited to go speak at a Celebrate Recovery, and so I went there and spoke and shared my testimony. But it's kind of crazy, man, because that was 20 years ago. Like I'm unashamed of anything that I've done, dude. Like that's because our tests become our testimony, right? And so I'm totally cool with sharing it. But when I was going to drive into that event that night to go speak, I was like, man, what am I going to speak on? It's been 20 years since I've had an addiction like that. But what I really started speaking on was unworthiness. I said, yes, I was a drug addict then, and I've had my struggles a few years ago. And I mean, sure, we all still struggle in certain ways. It was always based around unworthiness. And so just the drugs, the women, all of that was just me trying to go and ease the pain of being unworthy in a household where I was always told I'd never be anything, right? And then going to a high school where I was picked on, bullied, right? So I was always unworthy. So the drugs and all of that and the women was all just a part of that. But as I was doing that, right, ironically enough, I was in the music industry at that time as well on the side, and I was a rapper, go figure. And at that time, I was doing shows with, I mean, depending on how old your audience is, you'll know some of the artists, but I was doing shows with like Bone Thugs and Harmony, E40,
Oh yeah.
a lot of big artists. And yeah, dude, so like I was getting the famed extent, to a certain extent. I had all the women that I wanted. I was doing drugs. I was partying. I had the life that I always thought I wanted. And I was broke, like just emotionally broke, just unfulfilled. Like as soon as the drug would end, I'd have to find it again. As soon as I'd be done with one woman, I had to find another one, right? Because as soon as that was finished, and even during it wasn't really all that fulfilling, right? I was broken, right? And I started realizing there's a giant hole in my heart that nothing will ever fill. Fame, money, women, drugs, nothing will ever fill that. And thankfully, I realized that at a very young age. So I didn't keep doing that. Now, eventually I did it in other areas. And so I turned to God. Like, it was just like, man, I'm watching all of my friends who I thought were friends backstab each other. And not saying that I didn't too as well. I'm sure I was. But all of that was happening. And man, I was just so lost that when my mom gave me a book. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but it's called The Purpose-Driven Life. Amazing book. So any of your listeners, if you haven't read that book, read it. Literally, I think it's the second best-selling book of all time next to the Bible. Amazing book. I'm actually rereading it right now. And I always have my clients read that when they get into our program because how impactful it was in my life. But I read that book and it was the first time I saw God in a different light, more of a relationship light rather than a religion light. And that's when I was like, okay, I need this because that's what the type of life I want. And so, yeah, I was broken, brother. And Diane and me were broken up at that time. It was just my life was in a dark spot and I needed something that the world wasn't filling at all. So, yeah, that's kind of why I sought out God.
I see that you're coaching people, and are these clients of yours, are they pretty broken? Are they all different levels of spirituality? Are they Christian? Like, who are you bringing through your program, and what changes are you helping them with?
Yeah, I mean, great question. Ironically enough, the people that we tend to work with the most tend to be entrepreneurs, business owners, a bunch of different type of people like that. We do work with all different types, so it's not exclusive. It just happens to be that's just what draws to us. We do tell people when they book a call, like to do a consultation to see if they want to get in the program, that we are Christian coaches. And so I do sometimes work with people who aren't Christian. I've had some amazing transformations for those people, but I also don't like to limit my voice. It would be like, I don't know, selling somebody a car and not telling them that it doesn't run on gas, right? Like that for me, like there's the number one thing of what has made my life successful, what's made my marriage successful, what's made my business successful is all been God. So when it's hard, when I have to limit myself to not talking about faith at times, now sure, personal development, friendships, your alignments, all of that, it will elevate your marriage. But if you take out the faith aspect, it's tough. And so we tend to prefer to work with Christians. And honestly, we may switch that up in the near future to where we're only allowing Christians to come in, just because I do sometimes limit my voice on that. And I don't know, for me, that doesn't serve me. And so that might change. And so it's not always people who are at a severely broken spot. It's kind of a mixed bag. We work with a lot of couples, but oftentimes we'll work with just one individual in the marriage, because sometimes their spouse doesn't want to grow or is kind of done with them, and so they're doing a last ditch effort. So sometimes it's people who are in a marriage that's terrible, or sometimes it's people whose personal life is in a bad spot, or sometimes it's people who are actually killing life and just smashing life. They just want more, right? And just want to grow more and more and more. And so it's a variety of people, but the same process works for anything, right? Just because if we don't know how to lead ourselves well, we'll never be able to lead anybody else well. So if we're always growing, then life's going to always be good, right? I always say it's like pedaling a bike up the hill. As soon as we stop pedaling, we'll roll backwards. So it doesn't matter if you're in the pits of hell or you're on the mountaintops winning, you got to keep pedaling. And so it's kind of a multitude of people who we work with.
You, on your Instagram profile, it says Christ is King. And I want to know, like, when you became bold in like believing in God and Christ and started like really like wearing Christ outwardly, what were the biggest changes like with people in your life? Like what happened from that transition where you became like a fully committed Christian and very bold about it?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm going to tell another quick story here, and this will make a lot more sense, is because when I first like had my testimony I just told you about becoming when I was a drug addict and all of that, I was going to church, I was praying, I was like about that life, but the city I lived in was a little town called Eureka in Northern California, and there's only 30,000 people there. And, not to dog the people there because I was one of them, but everybody is very, 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 very mediocre. There's no opportunities for growth and development. There's no jobs. There's nothing. And so I was very stuck in mediocre. Thankfully, I had my rock, who was Diane, and we grew together, but I didn't have a community, which I will tell you right now is the number one thing outside of God that's changed my life these past few years. And so I'm just going to tell this little quick story, which will pre-frame exactly what that question was. And so I went through a wilderness period when I first became an entrepreneur, and that was the first time God was testing me to see how much I really was about this life and what I was capable of, because I know he knew, like, do we all have a purpose for our life? And he knows that, right? So if he knew where he was leading me, I had to go through the fire to be able to prove that I was ready. Well, I wasn't ready. As soon as the first big test came, when I finally went out on my own, that's when I went to a wilderness period and pulled the wheel from God. Still going to church, still praying, but really took the wheel from God and led my life for about 7, 8-ish years down a path that wasn't necessarily the best. I was still being a good husband and being a good father, but I was hating life, even though I had free, I don't want to say unlimited money, but a good amount of money, unlimited time, a house, 2 healthy kids, and a beautiful wife, and I hated my life, which is a whole long story. But to say what happened was a little over 3 years ago, I raced BMX bikes, and I had just come out of like retirement, and I went to a national. In the very first lap, I broke 5 ribs, collapsed my lungs, separated my shoulder, and literally was knocked out cold. I thought I was dead. I had to go stay in the trauma ICU in Las Vegas, where ironically we live now, but at that time we weren't living here. I had no plans on moving to Las Vegas. And on the ambulance ride to the hospital, like, because my lung was collapsed and I literally couldn't move, because if you ever broken a rib, you know it's like the worst thing ever. I had 5 crushed, right? Like, so I couldn't move an inch and I couldn't breathe. And the way the paramedics were talking was I thought I was dead. And I literally, I didn't feel God one bit in my life at that moment, which was super scary. But it was a testament of how I was living my life at that time, fully not trusting him, fully on my own agenda. And God literally had to break me off to then basically, it's like the bow and arrow pulling me back to launch me forward, because where I am now, I literally could not have told you or imagined that I'd be doing what I'm doing right now, where I'm at and who I'm aligned with now then. And so by me dying then, it was crazy because that was like 3 months before COVID hit. And then when COVID hit and all of that, me and my wife literally were just like, okay, we're done. We're packing up. We're moving our family. We randomly got on YouTube, safe neighborhoods to move in the desert, because we wanted year-round sun, because where we lived, it rained 8 months of the year. And we literally just flew down here. By the grace of God, somehow managed to pick up a second house because we had our house there. But when we moved here, we had literally 0 income, 2 kids, 2 mortgages, and no income. And everybody told us we weren't going to make it happen. And that's when we first burned the boats and let God actually take control of our lives. And the way that actually unfolded these past 3 years has been mind blowing. And so fast forward about your question. So we developed this business and we just kept burning one boat after another. We started off as fitness and nutrition. Then we developed into mindset. Then from mindset, it was relationships, and we started aligning with other big people. Well, last summer, I was redlining our business, just working 18 hours a day, trying to grow and all of this. Well, what ended up happening, I was doing it all on my own. I still hadn't met a whole lot of people in Vegas because COVID was just ending. And Vegas is kind of a weird transient city where just people move in and out so fast that I didn't really meet any good alignments. But to be honest with you, I really wasn't intentionally looking for them. And so last summer, I've always had coaches of my own, but they were always business coaches. I hired a coach last June, but it was like a group coaching program, and it's kind of a God story the way that happened. I reached out to this guy named Steve Weatherford, Super Bowl champion, and I was like, "Hey, brother, I know you're Christian and you're into a lot of things I am. Do you know of a Christian coaching program?" He said, "Brother, I'm going to San Diego in 3 weeks, and there's a spot left if you want it." That day right there, that one message, I don't know why God told me to message him, but I did. And he's been my personal coach now for the past 9 months. And I've invested an insane amount of money to do that. But what I've got out of that is having an alignment of men. I got about 15 to 20 men in that group that are literally some of the biggest business owners in all their industries, but 100% sold out for Christ. Nothing else matters to them but Christ. And then, of course, that bleeds to their family and their parenting. Their businesses are just kingdom businesses, which they use now for, serving God. And so when I actually sought out intentional alignments of people who lived their life the way that I valued mine, I had to pretty much distance myself from friends who weren't about the faith life, who weren't about leading themselves well, who weren't about being a good husband or a good father. They were being, in their eyes, a good husband or father. They thought that this is what you do every day. You drink beer, you have some buffalo wings, you talk crap to your friends about football, and you think you're living a good life. Farthest thing from it, right? When I got away from all those type of friends and got people in my life that were 1,000% sold out for Christ, my life hit a rocket ship about 9 months ago, so back June. And that's when our business took off. And that's when my faith in God, I actually got to really, 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 really know Christ. And I could bore everybody to death for 4 hours on insane God stories that have happened when I surrounded myself with men who are about that life. And so the number one thing we need to do is be about that life ourselves, but find people who are about that. And it's not going to be, oftentimes people say, well, how do I do that? If you're intentionally praying about it and saying yes to new opportunities, God will deliver those people. Oftentimes we're on our own agenda and block it. So I know it was kind of a long answer there, brother, but I hope that kind of gives you some insight on what it was.
Dude, that's a fascinating story about almost dying. And then, and it's really cool that you were conscious enough to know that you weren't living with God, because I've always believed in God. And sometimes you just think you're doing fine and you don't really know how much more there is. Mm-hmm. Until you really struggle and you're really intentional about it. Can you tell me more about like the nitty gritty of how you like learned how to fully trust God? I want to preface this by this quote on Instagram. It says, whatever you're like struggling with or like trying to control, that's where you don't trust God the most, whatever you're trying to control the most. And a lot of people have troubles with marriages or finances, or they're trying to control their children. And that really hit me that like, man, where I'm trying to control or where I'm stressed out about, that's where I'm not trusting God the most. So I know you believe that, but I want to know how you get to the point where you trust God, like some steps. And a follow-up with that is even when I get closer to God, he still tests us. It doesn't mean you're like in the clear. There's still a ton of trials and suffering. And it seems like, well, I trusted you and it's not turning out how I wanted. But I want to know how you like really learn to trust.
Great question, brother. And you're so right. Like at the end of that, right? Just because, and I think that's where a lot of people have either searched out God and then they think that when you find God, that it's all ice cream and cake, right? From there on, you're no longer going to be have pain. Your marriage is never going to struggle, and there's going to be no death or illness. It's just going to be this, and then then that happens, and they fall off, right? Or from the outside, an atheist point of view, they're like, man, you're giving your whole life to Christ, but dude, like you have cancer. Like, come on, bro. Like, be realistic. Well, dude, like Romans 8:28 says God uses everything for good, right? And I've witnessed that happen. Like I'm saying, dude, I almost died. That was the best day of my life by far. Because had that day not happened and God just let me stay mediocre, I would still be living in a city, actually in a worse spot right now, hating my life, right? And then of course, my wife is in a worse spot. My kids are in a worse spot. Our legacy for our family after this is in a worse spot. And so those moments are the best moments for us. We just got to pre-frame them and then reframe them when they happen as like, I already know blessings are going to happen from this. And I can say that just because I've had so many of those moments. Most people have had those moments. They just haven't turned and saw the blessings on the other side because they've been closed off to seeing those from them. But it's ironic you asked that question because for the past 2 weeks, that's been the theme that I've been coaching on in my coaching program is surrender. And it's just weird how God works this way where that's always been a big thing for me. But then the beginning of this year, I really, really, really had to surrender to God in certain areas. And then ironically enough, I started coaching on this. And then the devotional, I'm leading my Bible study. I have a men's group I lead on the weekends at my house. Happened to be the topic in the devotional that weekend was surrender. Then when I went to my coaching program last weekend in Texas to be with my men who I get coached by, it was on surrender. So it's just weird that you asked that, brother, because it's such a huge theme in my life right now. And it's ironic because I'm at this spot where I have pretty much 98% peace, no anxiety, no depression, no stress, no nothing like that. But that was not always my life. And that wasn't my life up until about 3 months ago. Not that I was in a bad spot, definitely not depression, but anxiety, especially with what we do for a living. We're based, because all of our clients, I'd say 95% of them come from Instagram, social media. So it's all based on organic algorithms, right? Like if I put out a piece of content and Instagram doesn't want to push it, then my finances are tied to that, right? And so I had to get to a point. So my emotions were up and down, but I had to get to a point, as Philippians 4:11-13 says, where Paul's talking and he says he's content, right? When he's had plenty and when he's had none, when he's been well fed and when he's been hungry, right? He's content, not complacent, content, right? That verse really stuck out to me during a few months ago. And I had to get to the point where I really had to lay my finances at God's feet and say, God, if I have $100 in my bank account or I have 100 million in my bank account, I'm good either way. And I'm just going to trust you. And I want to lay all my emotions and feelings at your feet. And I'm no longer from this day going to stress on that anymore because he knows I'm working and I already know God's going to take care of us in one way or another. And if it's the coaching business he wants to end and he wants to lead me somewhere else, then that's a yes. That may not be what I want, but if it's what he wants and I'm okay with that, then we're going to not have anxiety and stress on those things. And so I really did that. And it was crazy. And some of those things I had to do, I'll be real with you, I've watched miracles happen when I turned my tithing into a serious tithing. Not just if I had a good month, then I would tithe bigger. Or if I had a bad month, then I'd be like, maybe it's a smaller one this month. No, I started going above and beyond in my tithing and being a joyful tither. And I watched, and it wasn't like, oh, now I'm just making a ton of money because I'm giving more money. That's not what I'm saying. It was my anxiety and stress around money went away because I was now trusting God with my finances, which for so many people, the two number one things that we struggle with, especially men, is finances that we have trouble giving to God and then submitting to our flesh, right? Like whether that's porn or drinking or food, right? If we can win those two things, we're doing really, really good. Especially finances for, I would say 99.99999% of people is always going to be a stressor. Like I said, my coaching group that I roll with, I have dudes who have probably $500 million businesses. And somebody said it the other day. He said, take it from me, somebody who owns a giant company. You'll never be able to fill that giant God-sized hole in your heart with money or anything else like that. I tried. I have a giant business and it didn't change it one bit, right? And so when we get to that point of fully surrendering our finances and removing our emotions from that, it becomes really, really cool because our emotions and feelings are very real, right? But we can't let them control us. We need to control them. And the difference between an amateur and a professional is an amateur bases their feelings or their decisions off of their feelings and emotions, where a professional bases their decisions off their commitments. Well, for me, I'm committed to God. I'm committed to my wife. I'm committed to my kids. I'm committed to my clients, and I'm committed to the kingdom. So if I'm going to base my feelings and my decisions off of my finances, that's my feelings and emotions. But when I'm committed to God, all those other things go well. And so when I fully got to that point of just saying, hey, I can try to control this on my own. I can stress about it. We all know stressing doesn't help anything, right? One of my buddies was sharing a story the other day. He said, man, my buddy backed into a telephone pole the other day with his car, and he didn't hit anybody or anything. And then he was in the passenger seat, and then the driver just kept going. He's like, dude, aren't you going to get out and check your car? He's like, why would I? He's like, because you just backed into a telephone pole. He's like, I know. He's like, I'm going to have to fix it either way. So what am I going to do? Get out, throw a fit, be all bummed, cry? He's like, I know this is going to be a financial expense, but I can't change it. So why am I going to let my emotions dictate how my rest of my day goes? So many of us would get out, see our car smashed, cuss, throw a fit, yell at our kids, yell at our wife, let it ruin the rest of the day, stress over finances because now we got to do this. Well, now that's controlling our life. That's a choice that we all can make to not let that happen, right? And it's got to be fixed either way. So why let it trip on us? God will take care of it. And so long story answer is when you surrender, God is now your God saying, you're giving me something to work with. It's why the number one story in the Bible that we all reference this story on is what? Abraham, when he took Isaac to the altar. This is God's promise forever that he's going to give him a son. And now he wants him to kill him? Like, what the? But the cool part about that is it says Abraham rose early the next morning to go do it. He didn't say, next week it would be better, God. My wife's kind of having a struggle this week with some things, and we got to harvest the crops, and it's kind of bad weather. I've kind of had an upset stomach and make excuses. No, he said he rose early the next morning to go and do it. That showed he was obedient. He wasn't going to make an excuse, and he'd make it happen. And what God do? He blessed him because of that. So we need to get to that point of being able to do it. I can't say I'm fully there, but I'm saying I'm pretty darn close. And that's just because I've been after this for so long. And that's all I'm doing every day is seeking wisdom and knowledge and just want to be a servant to God. And when we can get to that spot, it's game on. God goes, now I can use you. But if we're holding on to our stuff, we're wanting to run down the street with all of our garbage chasing God, but God's saying like, hey man, you can run faster if you let go of all that stuff. So yeah, man, that's a long-winded answer, but this is kind of my testimony with it.
Dude, that's a beautiful answer. I love the idea of how you're saying we need to be like anxious to be following God, not hesitant, but like on top of it, excited to follow him, to trust him. And that's what Romans 8:28. I think that's one of my favorite scriptures. God works for the good of those who love him. It's we are doing things to show him, giving him steps to work with. I want to know how you know God is talking to you or guiding you. And why I want to know this is if there's guys out there who feel lost, who maybe feel like, hey, I'm praying, I'm doing what I'm supposed to. I don't feel like God's guiding me, or I have these choices to make. How do you know when God's telling you to do what you should do?
Great question, right? Because sometimes how do we know if it's his voice, our voice, the devil's voice, or somebody in our circle's voice, right? It's hard to decipher on all of those. And just as the Bible says, draw near to me and I'll draw near to you, right? So God's not the guy who's coming every day and like shaking us, come on, get out of bed, come roll with me, do this. He's going to wait until you draw near to him, and then he'll draw closer. You draw near to him, he'll draw closer. He's waiting for us to make that first step because we have the free will, right? And so when we're willing to do that, good things will happen. But then we got to hear his voice, right? So that's how we do it. The closer we get to him, the closer we'll hear his voice. It'd be like somebody standing on the other side of the football field and they're talking at this level, right? We're probably not going to hear him. We see the mouth moving. Maybe we'll catch a word or two. But as I step to the 10-yard line and then they step to the 10-yard line on the other side, I might be able to get them a little bit better. Then I go to the 20, they go to the 20. I go to the 30, they go to the 30, right? I'm going to be able to hear them better. That's how the relationship is with God. And it's, as the Bible says, right, never cease praying. Well, it doesn't mean we're just on our knees all day praying. That means that we're seeking him all day long. We're in communion with him all day long. We're basing our decisions all day long with him in mind. And when we do that, that's how we're able to hear him more. But if we're only showing up on Sundays to church just to check it off the list, we don't read the Bible, we don't do things like that, how are we going to hear his voice? James, I think it's James 15. It talks about the Bible, the word of God prunes us, right? Well, pruning is what makes our branches grow better in that. But if we're not in the word of God, how are we going to get God's voice? It drives me nuts, man. And I'm kind of bold sometimes, but man, when people are like, man, like there's people who are Christians and then there's people who are about that life. You got to pay the price to be a Christian, right? Like, it doesn't mean just because you got saved that like it's like a driver's license that you put in your card and you're like, yeah, man, I believe in God. That's what it is. And, I go to church on Christmas and Easter. It was just Easter a couple weeks ago, right? Packed house. Well, where are all these people the rest of the year, right? And then they're wondering why their life is in shambles or they're still struggling. Then there are those people who are questioning God. Why am I struggling? Well, your struggling is probably the same amount as everybody else, but you're also getting in those struggles, you're not able to handle that adversity because God's not having the strength, or you're not tapping into the authority of God because you're not showing up. We can't just show up on Sunday and expect to do good, right? Like, we can't have an amazing marriage if I just talk to my wife for an hour on Sunday and maybe say, talk to her for 2 to 3 minutes a night, right? Which some people do that for a prayer, which is probably more like a 30-second prayer to God at night, and show up to church on Sunday and they think they're good, right? And then they don't think about God the rest of the week. Well, it's like, dude, like, you're never going to understands God's voice. It's like a shepherd with the sheep, right? They follow the certain shepherd because they get so used to their voice, not because they got like lasers or shot collars on them. They get used to the shepherd's voice and they'll follow that voice. It's the same thing for God. We'll get to understand his voice more and more and more. And I always call them God stories, but I could literally tell you, like, on a daily basis how something super ironic happens in my life that's unexplainable. And it's just God nudging me that I'm on the right path, right? Or a scripture will jump out of me of something I was literally just talking about. I was praying for a girl on a consultation just 2 days ago, and I was just praying over that she needs to be the light for the people in her family and her kids because she sees herself as so unworthy. And I was talking about this light. And when I got done with the prayer, she was like, oh my God. And I was like, what? And she's like, your prayer was about light in me. And I was like, yeah. I was like, I don't know. That was just what was laying on my heart. She's like, the Bible verse that I have tatted on my wrist is Matthew, and I can't remember the verse, but it was like about you being the light to shine on other people. And she's like, your whole prayer was about that. You've never met me before and don't know I have that tattooed on my wrist, right? Those are the moments that God's speaking to us, right? And so when closer we are to him, the more we're going to decide for those things. If we feel good about something, we got to say yes, because the opportunities of a lifetime only last for the lifetime of the opportunity. And so the more we say yes to God's things he's placing in our life, we're going to watch how they turn out good. But so many times in life, it's like, let me think about it. I'll get back to you. Well, what are we doing? We're missing opportunities on a daily basis. That's why it said Abraham rose early the next morning rather than me saying, well, let me think about this. Like, so many times people say, let me think about this. And that used to be me. That's why I'd only get 2 blessings a year rather than 2 blessings a day, then 14 a week, right? Like, it goes, the more you are listening for God's voice and seeking him, the more you'll hear, then the more you'll be able to see that he's just placing things in front of you literally all day long that you can grab and grow. That's why so many kingdom people are winning, is because they're able to hear his voice rather than the other voice that's in our head, right? Is the devil's, and we listen to it. You're not worthy. You'll never be anything. This person's so much more talented than you are. Your wife is so mad at you. Your kids hate you. You're not talented. Like, we all tell her. I don't know about you, but I've told myself those things so often throughout my years. And I talk to so many people who do the same thing. That's not God's voice. God would never tell you you're not as good as so and so, that you're unworthy. The devil does. And for some reason, we listen to that voice more than God's voice. So I hope that it makes that kind of clear there, brother.
It totally does. I totally agree that we have to like be walking and moving towards God, and then we get to know his voice, and then it's so much easier to decipher what's coming from him and what's not. The next thing I want to ask you about is your marriage, and just some advice and some universal truths that you are living and teach about how to take a mediocre or damaged marriage and what men can do specifically. And we're not going to change our wives, but what we can take responsibility on ourselves to just up the game a little bit with our marriages.
Yeah. I mean, gosh, man, it's so sad the way our marriages are right now in the US. I mean, there's a divorce rate's 50%, but how many other people are still in a marriage that the marriage is terrible? I would probably say at least 30%. And oftentimes, some people might say they have a good marriage and it might be in that 20%, but I would probably say there's another 10% of people that it's a very mediocre 5 out of 10 marriage, if not worse. They just don't know any different. They think that that's the normal, that, hey, everybody argues. Hey, everybody struggles with this. As you get older, there's no more honeymoon phase. As we get older, we just tend to gain weight. As we get older, this is what happens. No, that's a lie. That's a choice, right? The honeymoon phase does never have to end. A marriage should get better and better and better every year. I promise you, I've seen it in countless other people, and I've seen it in my marriage, right? That's why I said at the beginning, the person we're most qualified to lead is the person that we used to be. Me and my wife have been together for 24 years, been married for 16, and literally our intimacy is better today than it was last year, the year before, the year before, the year before. I'm 42, my wife's 41. We're fitter today than we were when I was 20, my early 20s, and I was in the Marines, right? Like, so was I not fit then? Like, and I was in infantry, so I was definitely fit. But I'm way fitter now, right? Like, I'm mentally stronger, so we should be getting better every single year, and that's the same thing in our marriage. But how does that tie into taking to a mediocre marriage? One, it's that extreme ownership and just realizing that we can control the things that we can control. So if we're blaming anybody else, what we're doing is we're taking power away from us. So if we're saying, man, COVID was so hard and I had to really just kind of stay home and tucker down and things like that, and I didn't do anything. Well, yeah, that was a choice for you not to do anything. You could have made a choice to grow a business when you were home, to get super fit when you were home, to grow closer to God when you were home. We all have these choices to do it rather than just saying, well, this is my situation and I couldn't do it. We all have the power in every situation. Now, does a marriage take two? Absolutely. But if we decide to grow our light, let's say our marriages grow far apart, like I'm far on the left, they're far on the right in our marriage. If I decide to level up, that has nothing to do with them. As I'm growing, my light is going to be like a street lamp. It's going to shine farther down. If that pole gets higher, that light's going to shine wider. Eventually, you get that light so high, like the sun in the sky, it can shine on everything, right? So as we grow, we will shine that light on our kids and our wife. At first, the wife is going to hate you and tell you, oh, you're never going to follow through. Why are you doing this? Blah, 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 all of that. And I've seen that countless times. But eventually, once you prove, because they're waiting for the shoe to drop, that the shoe's never going to drop, and you're leading yourself spiritually, mentally, physically, and emotionally, and then relationally, in all new levels, and you're changing, good things happen. Ephesians really talks about this. We need to do three main things. We need to change our old patterns and ways. We need to remove those. We need to change our thinking, and then we need to develop new habits. So if I'm bringing my old patterns and ways aren't changing and I'm still in my marriage and I'm just saying, well, I'm trying to be more communicative to her. Well, did you change your own patterns and ways? Well, no, I'm still doing X, Y, and Z. Well, that's why it's not working. Did you change the way you think? Are you still talking negatively all day and hanging out with negative people and thinking negatively? Well, yeah, because the world's a rough place. Well, no, you didn't change your thinking. No wonder it didn't change. And did you develop new habits? Well, I don't know. I kind of like the life I live and doing these things. Yeah, that's why nothing changes in our marriage. And so we've really got to change and develop in all those different areas. And when we lead ourselves better, we're qualified to lead others. But we'll never be able to lead others if we're not able to lead ourselves. It starts 1000% with us. I've seen it in so many marriages, countless. I've seen it in my relationship. When my wife decided to join this business, she thought I was crazy. She worked the same job for 19 years, zero in front of the camera. The first video she did was the worst, right? But now, she's grown because she just decided, hey, I'm watching my husband lead himself and I'm going to follow suit. It wasn't easy. She cried many, 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 many tears about becoming this new person. But now she leads people all over the world, and I'm more proud of her every single day. I just look at her and I'm like, I can't believe this is my wife. She's got 4 days left in 75 hard. If you guys don't know about 75 hard, look it up. I only know a couple people who've actually really finished it. She's about to finish it. 4 years ago, there'd have been zero chance she would have finished it. Now she just beasted it. Not even like a tear, no emotion, just crushed it, right? So when we lead ourselves well, our marriage will change. But if we say, hey, my wife is a terrible person and she can't change and she's not doing anything, that's blaming them. What are you really doing? And 2 weeks isn't going to do it. 4 weeks isn't going to do it. It'll help. You need to be this new person for the rest of your life. It sometimes will take a year. Sometimes it might take 18 months, right? That's why a doctor becomes a doctor after 10 years. He didn't become a doctor in 2 weeks and say, well, I'm not a doctor yet, I'm going to quit. No, he had to keep going. So keep going with no emotional ties to it, trusting God that he'll develop you when you're ready, as long as you're taking action, and your marriage will drastically change. But it's on us. It's not on them. It's on us, 100%.
I would love to hear how you describe a high-level marriage, a marriage that's really beautiful, that's functioning well. Both partners are working together, like how beautiful it can be. I would love that vision. So someone who maybe doesn't believe it can happen or what it looks like, that they can get a vision of what's possible.
Yeah, no, I love that, right? Because we got to know what we want to be able to go get. And oftentimes, I literally was talking with a client yesterday, and he's I don't want to say an anomaly. It's happening faster for him than it sometimes happens for other people, but he's about 5 weeks in with us, because we typically do 6-month programs is what it is, because we're dealing with marriages and we're dealing with past histories and traumas and patterns and ways that we got to unravel and set new ones in. He's about 5 weeks in. At the end of the call, he's just like, man, I just can't believe where I'm heading in my life right now. And so many things. He's like, all my dreams are coming true. And he's like, man, I don't think you knew how dark it was when I first contacted you. He says, I don't think I would have harmed myself, but I'll be real with you, I don't know. And this is a guy who has like pretty good money, a good family. Like you wouldn't know it from the outside, right? But that's where his life was at. And then now to hear him talking the way he's talking and leading himself, it's crazy. So it happens. So people think, but he said for the 9 years before that, he said he thought he had a good marriage. He just didn't know any different. He said, well, now I'm growing and I'm seeing possibility in all areas of my life. I now see that, good Lord, I was stuck for 9 years. And the reason why he got to that spot where he said he wasn't sure if he was going to harm himself was because his wife told him, I'm not sure I want to be in this marriage anymore. And he thought he had a good marriage. But what he realized was it was just a mediocre marriage, right? Just going through the motions. And so when I say this, oftentimes people say, well, everybody argues. Well, that doesn't need to be that way. Doesn't mean that we are going to disagree on certain opinions, but we don't have to argue, yell, call names, throw things, whatever. That should never happen, ever, right? If we decide to base our decisions on our commitments, that should never happen, right? And so make fast forward to what a good marriage looks like. I'll just kind of give you an example of what my life is. And I really feel like God uses our marriage to be possibility for other people. Because like I said, I came from a marriage as a parent who literally have one of the worst marriages I've ever seen. My wife comes from a broken home, alcoholic father, things like that. So he took our situations, we were talking about Romans 8:28, right, and used it for good and placed us in these positions to then lead others, because we've experienced that. We kind of lived it a little bit in the beginning of our relationship, and then to now have it. An amazing marriage is where you just literally can finish each other's sentences because your quality time is so on point, where you just desire to spend more and more and more time with your wife. We all know the 5 love languages. If you don't, read the book. It's amazing, but it won't necessarily fix your marriage. It's a good starting spot. Quality time, we redid the test recently. For me, my wife is both number 1. Years ago, that would not have been the case. If you can get your quality time to the top where you just desire to spend time with your wife, we no longer watch TV. We used to binge watch TV shows, right? We no longer do that because we just want to sit on a couch and just talk to each other. We just want to, I travel a lot for my own personal coaching. She comes with me. I can't go anywhere without her because I just desire her to be with me at all times. When that can happen, that's amazing. Whereas I know a lot of marriages, they're like, man, I can't wait to go hang out with the boys this weekend just to get away from my wife. Or, oh, I got to have quality time with my wife right now. Okay, I'll do it just because she's my wife. But it's like, no, you got to desire that. And man, when I wake up in the morning and I see her, I'm just so stoked, right? And so when we talk about personal development, we talk about faith. We're both going to church. We're both seeking Christ. We're both praying together. We're both into fitness, going to the gym together. We're both leading our kids in all of those areas as well together. But the number one thing is if you guys can just desire quality time with each other, not being on your phone, not being watching TV, not doing things like that. I'm not saying don't ever do that. But if you just desire your spouse more than that, you will know your spouse so well that intimacy has no choice but to be through the roof. Because I see my wife's soul. She's bearing her soul with me, her happiness, her fears, anything like that, her excitement she shares with me. A hiccup that happened in the day and why that was a hiccup, she shares so deep on that with me that I just know her soul so much that I just want to have her in my arms. Not for the finish. Sure, that's all, will we all enjoy that? But it's because of the closeness of the actual emotional intimacy that then brings on the physical intimacy. Like I said, we've been together for 24 years and we're still, our intimacy, physical side of things is probably 3 to 4 times a week. And we run a very busy business, right? We have 2 kids, right? We have a lot on our plate, but that's there because we spend so much quality time with each other. So getting a marriage to where you're not arguing, where you just want to serve each other. It's not like, oh, she wants me to mow the lawn, or God, I gotta help her with the dishes again. Like, you should want to do that because you just love your wife so much. And if you don't want to do that, then you have to ask yourself, do I really love my wife? Right? And that might be like, I mean, we love them, but are we really, really in love? So you should want to serve them. Your intimacy should just be flowing like it's nothing. My wife, for years, it was always me initiating, and her, she never would. She was always game. Now my wife probably initiates sex way more than I do. It should be such a balance in that, in the service, in all the areas of life should just be 100% on point. The full trust, right? She said something to me last summer. We were on a walk and she's like, you literally can go do anything and it's a yes from me. And believe me, I've spent some insane money last few years on coaching and on business and things. And every time she says, hey, if that's what you feel is best, it's a yes. That's how close we are. Because we know each other and she knows that if I fail with that, I'm not going to take it out on her. And she'll know I'll fix it because we know each other so well. I literally can tell my wife anything and I just want to hold her and I just want to talk to her. That's where the marriage should be at. Your visions should align. Your goals should align. Everything in your life, as the Bible says, to become one. We think that's a weird statement. I've watched it happen to where my wife and I are literally almost one now on every aspect of life. She's on fire for God, where for many years it was just me on fire for God. She loves fitness just as much, if not more than I do now. She's killing it. And she used to hate fitness. It was pulling teeth for her to go to the gym. She's on fire with it. She just reads books, things after end. She's all about leading and coaching other people. She responds to a challenge from me with a yes, not a F you. She literally just will do anything that I ask, but I'm not asking to anything that I don't know that she doesn't desire because I know her so much. So I always say, imagine a relationship as a triangle. The husband's at the bottom on one side, the wife's on the other, and God's at the top of the tip of the triangle. As you get closer to God, that's how you guys become one. But you got to be surrendered to all of that, to God, and to all of that together. And so, man, I could talk forever on what that actually looks like, but it's going to look different for everybody because everybody's got different lives. But there should be no tension, no anxiety, no nothing around anything in your relationship. If there is, that's a sign that we need to clean that up. Because I know a lot of people have a hard time being vulnerable with their spouse because their spouse reacts a certain way. Should never be that. Or I should be able to tell my wife like the literallyest crazy things, and you'll believe me, I've told her some crazy things, and she's just like, boom, right back with her craziness. And so that's where it should be, man, not as like a fear in those things. And so, yeah.
Dude, that's beautiful. It's super inspiring. I mean, I learned a ton just from that, and I've got a pretty good marriage, but definitely I'm more inspired to make it even better and work towards it. Dude, the last thing I want to ask you is, what is your daily practice with the divine?
So, man, I'm super regimented in all areas of my life, man. Like, and any of my clients would tell you that the number one thing I preach is consistency and non-negotiable on everything in my life. It's a non-decision on everything that I want and I say I'm going to do, right? And that's how we become a high-level husband, right? Is if that's how our spouse trusts us, is that when we say what we're going to do, right? And so we're not going to trust ourselves. That's why a lot of people struggle with confidence issues, is because We say we're going to do something and we don't do it. I might say I'm going to go to the gym. I got too busy today. I'm not going to do it. We break our own promises so much that how are we going to have our own confidence? But when you can get to being consistent and non-negotiable with all the things that you say you're going to do, and it doesn't matter if you're tired or not, you get them done. You go to bed a champion and you get to wake up a champion, and it feels really good, and so it bleeds over. And so for me, my spiritual practices in all of that is the very first thing I do in the morning is pray. That's pretty simple and short, maybe 3-4 minutes. And then I immediately read a chapter in the Bible. Every single day, that's my non-negotiable. I have to read at least one chapter in the Bible. And what I've done over the years, because that was a practice, I'll be real with you, sometimes I would be reading that chapter to just get through the chapter because I said I have to do it rather than actually soaking up the knowledge. And I had to really tell myself, no, dude, like, who cares if this is a habit? Like, you have to make sure you're getting something out of this. Who cares if you read it for 365 days a year? If you only got something out of it 2 days, you wasted those other times. And so now I'm very intentional about, like, if I read something, if my mind drifts, then I go back and I reread it. What am I going to soak up on it? And because of what I do for a living, I get to talk God multiple times throughout the day. And typically what I read that morning, a lot of times will play out into my coaching calls that day. It's weird how that works. And so I read the chapter a day. Like I said, I used to be Catholic, and praying the rosary was a big thing then. And I saw a lot of fruit of that back then. Like I said, I'm not Catholic anymore, but when I was on Spiritually Fired back then, I was praying it every day. And so now I pray that daily through the starting of January 1st this year. I've only missed one day, and that wasn't intentionally. I literally just forgot that day, and I woke up the next day like, no. And so I do that. And so I pray that every day. I know not everybody's Catholic or going to do that, so I'm not going to necessarily recommend that for you, but that gives me about an extra 10 to 15 minutes of intentional prayer behind it. Every single night we pray as a family, the four of us, me and Diane, take turns praying for our kids, praying for other people, but being intentional with that prayer of not just being like, oh, we pray grandma for her hip, we thank you for this food on our table, and going through a boring prayer. God wants a dangerous prayer out of your mouth. God wants a real, raw, emotional prayer. I'm reading Jeremiah right now. Jeremiah's prayers weren't like just the simple prayers. It was like he was kind of arguing with God a lot because he was getting beat down. But that was also a real prayer and real emotion. So really having those prayers in my own time, but with my kids as well, to let them hear the words out of my mouth aren't just the mundane. So I'm very intentional with that. That's kind of my daily. I'm always in a spiritual book that I'm listening. I'm a big book listener, so I'm always listening a day, whether that's listening to a podcast. I'm always in communication with certain friends, dropping motivational stuff. On Saturdays, I lead a Bible study at my house. On Sundays, of course, we go to church. And so I'm pretty intentional every single day about what I do in my communication with God. And then when I get in bed by myself, I pray again. I'm all, like I said, and then I do read a book when I get into bed as well, which is always a spiritual book. So I'll be real with you. I'm searching wisdom and knowledge and to be as close as with God right now as I can be. Because all I've noticed is when I've done other things, I've been fitter than I've been fit. Like maybe a year ago, I was fitter than I am right now. But it was cool, but it didn't serve me as much as I'm seeking God, right? And so when we do that, it's crazy how we unlock new levels of getting to know him. And I can, sometimes when I'm talking God to certain people, they're like, bro, have you lost your mind a little bit? And it's like, no, man, I'm just getting that close to God that he's revealing crazy things to me. And I would have told you years ago, if I was talking like this, that I must need to be put in an insane asylum because I don't know what this is coming out of my mouth, but it's possible when we get close to God. So I search close every day, brother.
Just hearing your daily spiritual practices, I mean, if we were all doing that, how would we ever be tempted to numb ourselves, to drink ourselves silly, to go gossip, to get into porn? Like, how would we even have time or have that even come into our lives if we were so invested in being real with God and being real, worrying about our family and praying for them and others, you know, like
a pastor of the church I go out to in Texas when I'm out there, man, Elevate Light Church. Shout out to them, Pastor Keith Craft and Josh Craft. Amazing. If you like him, dudes who are bold, watch their services online. They're super bold and they've changed my life tremendously. But they were talking this week that only 3% of Americans right now are healthy. whether that's physically or mentally healthy. But so then that correlates, right? Only 3% of Christians read the Bible daily. Only 3% of Christians tithe regularly. So is there a correlation between Americans being only 3% healthy and that they're only 3% are reading the Bible daily? You're so right. The more authority we unlock when we're doing those things. There's a guy in my group out there, he's a 22-year-old, I don't want to say kid, but good Lord, I'm 20 years older than him, runs ultra marathons, and he's just about that life. And he was saying, man, like I quit drinking. And then he said, then after that, it was like, man, I was still watching porn a little bit here and there, but I really wasn't addicted to it. So I stopped, but I was still taking care of myself. And so it was the lesser of two evils. I wasn't watching porn, but I was still, taking care of myself. And he's like, man, I feel bad after that. He says, because he's travels with my coach who speaks on big stages and things, like I'm in around a lot of people. He's like, but then I'm praying to lead people to Jesus, and I'm praying to heal people, and I'm praying to do all this. He's like, am I blocking my spiritual authority because I'm doing those things? Yeah, I definitely am, right? The people, like if you watch Paul, Peter, all those people who were healing people and doing crazy things, it's because they were super about that life. So if we're only a little bit about that life, we only have a certain amount of authority. So if we can really do more and more, getting closer to God, we'll have more authority, right? And so you're right, man. If everybody just stepped it up, and there's people who are way holier than me, far leaps and bounds. But if everybody just stepped it up 1% every day, this world would be drastically different. And it's just about being intentional with it and non-negotiable. I don't care if you're tired. I don't care if you've had a bad day. I don't care what it is. Just do it and watch your life change.
Amen, brother. Let's end it right there. Thank you so much for coming on. I'll link to High Level Husband. I'll link to your stuff so people can find you and follow you and continue to be inspired. But that was awesome. Thank you so much.
No, thank you, Eric. I appreciate you, brother. That was good times. You had amazing questions, and God bless everybody listening to this. Let's go find out what's possible in our life.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. More importantly, I hope you feel closer to your Creator. If you find yourself wanting to strengthen your relationship with God, I'm a huge fan of the Skylight app. It's full of beautiful, high-quality daily spiritual practices. Finally, never forget, in all things, God works for the good of those who love Him.